Insurance, I'd probably say 75. If you would come to me with this book 20 years ago, I would say maybe $20,000. I consider it an honor just to be standing here holding it and seeing it. So thank you.
Thank you. It is a treasure for our family, and having you share this information has been very, very enlightening and very dear to me.
Every year, families walk into Antiques Roadshow carrying heirlooms inherited from their great-great-grandparents. To them, it's just a cherished piece of family history. But to expert appraisers, it's a holy grail. In this video, we're counting down the most astonishing, high-value heirlooms that survived multiple generations, from centuries-old French clocks to rare historical relics, and the jaw-dropping moments their owners realized what they actually had. Welcome to our channel. Make sure to drop a like on this video, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss an episode.
It belonged to my great-great-grandmother. I don't think it was an engagement ring, because I think back in those days, and she died in 1912, that they weren't given engagement rings.
So what we have here is a platinum, diamond, and sapphire ring. I would characterize it to be from the Edwardian period.
When this ring appeared on Antiques Roadshow, it was first seen simply as a piece of family jewelry passed down through generations. But after taking a closer look, the expert quickly realized this was not just an ordinary antique ring. It was a piece from the Edwardian period, an era famous for elegant jewelry designs in the early 20th century, when platinum was used to create delicate structures strong enough to hold precious gemstones. From the detailed craftsmanship to the surrounding diamonds, every element showed the quality of the piece. But the detail that truly caught the expert's attention was at the center.
The featured aspect of this ring is, of course, the sapphire. And when I saw that sapphire, my eyes lit up.
In the world of gemstones, not every sapphire carries the same value. Beyond size and beauty, a stone's origin can create an enormous difference. And this sapphire had signs that reminded the expert of one of the most sought-after sapphires in the world.
Cashmere sapphires are considered to be the most beautiful, perfect, standard sapphire that you could have in a piece of jewelry. In 1880, there was a landslide in the Kashmir region of India, and that landslide revealed sapphire deposits. The sapphires that were coming out of this area were the most beautiful in their color and their depth and their quality.
Cashmere sapphires are famous for their unique blue color and extreme rarity, because the supply from this region existed for only a very limited period. Although further testing would be needed for absolute confirmation, the possibility that this stone came from Kashmir was enough to turn the family ring into a piece collectors would desire. Then came the appraisal that completely surprised its owner.
And if it is indeed a cashmere sapphire, which I feel pretty confident it is, at auction I think we're looking at somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000.
Oh, wow. Okay.
A ring once considered only a family keepsake turned out to possibly contain one of the rarest sapphires in the world, with a value far beyond anything its owner ever expected. The British Army Silver Centrepiece.
It was presented to the 10th Hussars, Prince of Wales's own, by King George IV on his accession to the throne.
This centerpiece once stood in the officers' mess of the King's Royal Hussars and came with a remarkable connection to both the British Army and the monarchy. That history alone would have made it an important object, but the appraisal took an unexpected turn when the expert began examining the maker's mark.
We've actually got a maker's mark appearing here, and the maker's mark there is PR. Now that is not Paul Storr's mark.
For years it had been believed that the piece was made by Paul Storr, one of Britain's most celebrated silversmiths. Yet the mark stamped into the silver told a different story.
Rundle, Bridge and Rundle, the Royal Goldsmiths. The maker's mark there is that of Philip Rundell. I would suggest the greatest firm that there has ever been in the history of silver.
Far from reducing its importance, that discovery linked the centerpiece to an even more influential name. Rundell. Bridge and Rundell served as royal goldsmiths and employed many of the finest craftsmen of the Regency era. The piece itself was made of silver gilt, silver covered with a layer of gold, and was designed less as a practical object and more as a statement of prestige and power. Most importantly, it was unique. Commissioned by a king. Presented to one of Britain's most distinguished cavalry regiments. Those details placed it in a category few antiques could ever reach.
And its last valuation, we believe about 10 years ago, had it in the area of £750,000.
Right, 750,000. I would go along with that. It is, after all, a unique piece, commissioned by the king for presentation to one of the greatest of all the regiments.
£750,000 for a piece of silver. But for collectors, its true value lies in something much rarer. A one-of-a-kind object that connects the British monarchy, the military, and more than 2 centuries of history. One of the most satisfying moments on Antiques Roadshow is when someone walks in with an object and has absolutely no idea what they're really holding. That is exactly how this story begins. The owner believed he had brought in nothing more than a Civil War cartridge box. An interesting military relic, but certainly not an exceptionally rare one. At least that was what he had always believed.
What I believe is a Civil War cartridge pouch.
Would you be surprised if I told you it's a little earlier than Civil War?
Yeah, I would be.
With just one question, the entire story changed. Not the Civil War. Something almost a century older. And moments later, the truth was revealed.
That's because this is an original Revolutionary War soldier's cartridge box.
No kidding.
And it's not 43rd New York, and it's not 43rd Massachusetts.
Suddenly, the object on the table was no longer an ordinary military artifact. It had become a surviving relic from the American Revolutionary War. According to the expert, this cartridge box may even have been present at famous battles such as Lexington and Bunker Hill. If that's true, it witnessed some of the earliest chapters in the history of the United States.
It had, to this point, the only known non-excavated example of that plate. It's got the original buff leather shoulder sling. It's got the original closure tab, still present. It's got the original wooden block on the inside of it.
But its historical importance was only part of the story. What truly excited the expert was its remarkable condition. Nearly every major component had survived intact after almost 250 years. That is extraordinarily rare for any military artifact from this period.
Finding all of those things together is like lining up all of those numbers on a lottery ticket.
To a collector, discovering an artifact like this is almost the equivalent of winning the lottery. And by now, everyone knew its value would be nothing like that of an ordinary Civil War cartridge box.
If this was a Civil War cartridge box, with the sling and everything, you're talking around $1,000, maybe $1,500 if it's really pretty. This one, on today's market, would retail for between $20,000 and $25,000. I think without a doubt, it would bring at least $50,000, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if it didn't bring twice that.
What the owner believed was a $1,000 military relic suddenly became an artifact worth at least $50,000 with the potential to bring twice that amount. That's the kind of twist that makes Antiques Roadshow so compelling. Because sometimes the greatest value of a historical object isn't determined by how it looks, but by the exact moment in history it managed to survive. Some books are kept because of their sentimental value. Others are protected because their owners already know they are rare. But this copy of the Book of Mormon remained locked inside a safe for years, while the family had no idea they possessed one of the most important editions in the early history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Only when the safe was finally opened did they realize it was not the European edition they had always assumed it to be.
I brought an old Book of Mormon. It's an 1840 edition, and this was in our family. My grandpa was a collector, and he passed it to my dad, and my dad kept it in the safe.
Passing from grandfather to father and then remaining protected in a safe had unintentionally spared the book from much of the damage that often affects volumes of this age. But what attracted the experts most was its connection to the turbulent early years of the Mormon community. During the early 19th century, believers repeatedly moved in search of a place where their faith would be accepted. Books printed during this period therefore carry unusual historical importance, Yet one even more significant detail still had to be confirmed.
One of the reasons the book is important and very collectible, Joseph Smith was still alive when this edition was done. And for collectors of the Book of Mormon, one of the key big factors is there were 4 editions printed when he was alive.
That was the detail that defined the book's importance. It belonged to one of only 4 editions printed during Joseph Smith's lifetime, meaning he was still present to witness its publication. For collectors and institutions studying early Mormon history, editions from this period are valued far more highly than those produced later. Although the original binding had been replaced, the text itself remained in excellent condition after nearly 2 centuries. That combination of historical importance and preservation made it one of the most notable copies the appraiser had encountered.
The actual book in this is in great condition. A retail price $50,000 to $60,000.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's crazy. That is amazing.
$50,000 to $60,000. Insurance, I'd probably say $75,000.
The valuation was surprising enough, but the most memorable moment came afterward. The appraiser admitted that simply being able to hold and examine the book was an honor. It was an unusually personal reaction and revealed just how highly he regarded the historical significance of the object.
If you had come to me with this book 20 years ago, I would say maybe $20,000. I consider it an honor just to be standing here holding it and seeing it. So thank you.
Thank you.
For the family, it had always been a treasure preserved across generations. For collectors, it was a rare surviving witness to the period when Joseph Smith was still alive and directly involved in the growth of the church. Sometimes the greatest value of a book lies not only in its age, but in the chapter of history it is quietly preserved for almost 2 centuries. A book missing nearly half of its pages would normally have very little collectible value, but that rule hardly applies when the surviving portion belongs to Shakespeare's first folio, one of the most important books ever published in the English language. This copy had remained in the same family since the owner's great-grandfather acquired it. Yet because it lacked the title page, was missing hundreds of pages, and had been rebound, no one knew how much value could possibly remain.
I brought in a partial Shakespeare First Folio that I've had for about 15 years, and it's been in my family since my great-grandfather acquired it earlier in the 20th century, I believe. He collected a lot of interesting things from all over the world, so this is just one of his interesting things that he brought home with him.
The first folio was published in 1623, 7 years after Shakespeare's death. It brought together around 36 of his plays for the first time, and several famous works might have disappeared entirely if they had not been preserved in this edition. That history means even an incomplete copy carries a significance that ordinary antiquarian books rarely possess.
If you talked about an iconic book in the English language, the first folio of Shakespeare is one of them. Probably next to the Bible, Shakespeare is the most commonly printed book in the English language. Usually when you have a book and you say, it's only 176 pages out of, I think it was 400 something.
Only 176 pages remained, and the original binding was gone. However, whoever rebound the volume had not trimmed the page edges, preserving the printed text and margins. More importantly, 2 plays were still complete. For a first folio, that detail changed the entire appraisal. Complete copies can sell for millions of dollars, and most are now held by major libraries, museums, or institutions. As a result, collectors still pursue complete plays, fragments, and even individual leaves printed in 1623.
2 of the plays are complete. Those plays in and of themselves are valuable. You could take this book apart, sell the 2 individual plays that are complete. People will buy individual pages.
Instead of treating the volume as a badly damaged book, the appraiser considered each surviving section as a collectible object in its own right. Every page remained an original piece of Shakespeare's printed legacy, so its value could never be measured simply by counting what was missing.
Basically, this book, as it is, missing half the book, rebound, fragments, and so on, is probably retail a $40,000 to $50,000 book, which has gone up a lot since 1990.
Yes, it has.
Despite losing nearly half its contents and its original binding, the book was still valued at $40,000 to $50,000. It proved that with a work of this importance, value does not depend only on how many pages survive, but on the history those pages have continued to preserve for more than 4 centuries.
This guitar was purchased by my father, I believe, in the year 1962. My dad was a Marine, and when he got out of the Marines, married my mom and moved to Minneapolis area and decided he wanted to learn how to play guitar. So he went to the Minneapolis, either Star or Tribune, and looked in the ads.
The classified?
In the classified ads.
A man leaves the Marines, starts a new life, gets married, and decides he wants to learn guitar. At first, it sounds like an ordinary family story. No famous stage, no legendary band, no historic performance attached to the instrument, just a father opening the classified ads in a local newspaper and buying a guitar because he wanted to teach himself how to play. But that simple decision brought one of the most desirable late 1950s Gibson semi-hollow guitars into his family. Because this was not just an old Gibson, it was a 1959 Gibson ES, Tres, Cinco, Cinco Mono. In the vintage Gibson world, 1959 is not just another year. It belongs to a period when Gibson was producing some of its most celebrated electric guitars, and the ES semi-hollow line was one of the company's most important ideas. Traditional hollow-body guitars had a warm, open sound, but as amplifiers became louder, feedback became a real problem. Gibson's answer was the semi-hollow design, hollow wings for resonance, with a solid center block to make the guitar more stable when amplified. The ES-355 was the more luxurious version of that idea. And this one had another important detail. It was mono. To collectors, an early mono ES-355 can be especially appealing because it feels simpler, more direct, and closer to the original sound many players want, compared with later stereo configurations. Then comes the factory Bigsby, meaning the tremolo was part of the guitar's original setup, not something added years later. But the biggest clue was hidden in the pickups. This guitar came from the PAF humbucker era, one of the most sought-after periods in vintage Gibson history. And if those pickups were double white PAFs, that small internal detail could add serious value. With the original hang tags still present, the story became even stronger. A guitar bought from the classified ads, played by a father for a lifetime, was suddenly revealed as a 1959 Gibson, with details collectors could spend years trying to find.
It's roughly around $45,000.
My father would be so incredibly pleased to find that out.
And that's if it has the double whites, which I'm assuming it probably does.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. My dad would be so proud to know that.
Around $45,000 for a guitar once found in the classified ads. But the son's reaction shows that the money is not the most emotional part. The first person he thinks of is his father, the man who left the military, taught himself guitar, and played this instrument throughout his life.
Well, I inherited it from my grandfather. He had worn it when I was a little child. All the time that I knew him, he wore this watch. And it intrigued me just because of the moon phases, I think. When he passed, I inherited it. I took it in to a repair shop because part of it wasn't working. They indicated that it really wasn't worth fixing and that a new face had been put on it.
But what that repair shop did not realize was that this was not just another old Rolex. Hidden behind that small dial was one of the rarest and most unusual chapters in Rolex history. Today, most people associate Rolex with legendary sports watches like the Submariner, GMT Master, or Daytona. But before those models became global icons, Rolex briefly explored a completely different direction, creating complicated watches that focused more on traditional watchmaking craftsmanship. And the MOONPHASE calendar was one of the most fascinating examples. This watch did much more than simply tell time. It combined a calendar display showing the date, day, and month with a MOONPHASE complication that followed the cycle of the moon. This type of feature is usually associated with traditional high-end watchmakers, where the value comes not only from accuracy but from the mechanical artistry hidden inside. But what makes this Rolex even more interesting is how short its production period was. After only a limited time, Rolex shifted its focus toward tool watches designed for divers, pilots, explorers, and people working in demanding environments. That decision helped create the Rolex identity known around the world today. But it also made watches like the MOONPHASE calendar incredibly uncommon. For vintage Rolex collectors, the smallest details can completely change the story. The case, serial numbers, dial condition, and originality are all examined carefully because each piece helps prove how much of the watch's history has survived. And that is where this example became complicated. Because in the vintage watch world, making something look newer does not always make it more valuable. An original dial with natural aging can sometimes be far more desirable than one that has been restored to look perfect. The fading, the small changes, and the marks left behind by decades of use are often exactly what collectors are searching for. They are proof of the watch's original journey. So even though this MOONPHASE remained an extremely rare Rolex, the changes made in the past created a major difference that only serious collectors would truly understand.
This watch, I think easily today at auction, would be $35,000 to $45,000 in the condition it's in.
That's a big surprise. Well, that's great.
I haven't seen a Rolex MOONPHASE in the 10 years I've been filming Antiques Roadshow walk-in, so it's nice that you brought one in. I've been waiting for one, and you brought it in, so I appreciate that. If it had a very strong dial, this watch could be $1 million.
Not every important work of art is preserved in a museum or displayed in a prestigious collection. Sometimes, a portrait quietly hangs on the wall of an ordinary family home for decades, with no one realizing they are living alongside a piece of art history. That was exactly the story behind this painting. To the family, it was simply a portrait of their father. But the artist behind it would later become one of the most influential figures in American art.
My father was in the service in 1945. I became friends with Robert Rauschenberg. From my understanding, he wanted to go to an art show on their day of leave, and they went to the art show, and Robert Rauschenberg said, I think I can do that. And so, lo and behold, a few days later, painted my dad's portrait.
In 1945, Robert Rauschenberg was still a young sailor serving in the U.S. Navy. After the war, he devoted himself to art and eventually became one of the pioneers of the Neo-Dada movement, helping shape the future of contemporary American art. Because of that, works created before he achieved international fame are especially desirable. This portrait captures one of his fellow servicemen during the earliest stage of his career, making it far rarer than the works he produced later. But the discovery that truly impressed the appraiser was still to come.
And I think these are great because they actually show, this one right here shows your father sitting while in the Navy with Robert Rauschenberg.
Yes, exactly.
Accompanying the portrait were photographs showing the two men together during their Navy service. To the art world, these were far more than family snapshots. They were valuable evidence confirming the painting's history. Years earlier, the family had even submitted documentation to the Rauschenberg Foundation, where the work received official recognition. The combination of an early painting, outstanding provenance, and authenticated documentation created exactly the kind of package collectors and auction houses hoped to find. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for.
Given the importance of the work, the earliness of the work, and the fact that it has such well-established provenance and authenticity, I would put a conservative auction estimate of $40,000 to $60,000 on it.
Holy cow, are you kidding me? I guess it was worth more than that $2 picture right next to it.
The estimate of $40,000 to $60,000 left the family stunned. What they had always considered nothing more than a treasured reminder of their father was now recognized as an exceptionally rare work from the beginning of Robert Rauschenberg's career. The wartime friendship, the remarkably complete provenance, and Rauschenberg's extraordinary place in American art history combined to transform this modest portrait into a painting that any serious collector would be eager to own. The French bronze clock.
Why is it so dirty? Do you not look after it?
No, it lives in a box in the attic because it's so ugly.
Really?
Yeah.
Who banished it up there?
My wife.
To this family, the clock was simply an old, dusty object that nobody found particularly attractive. But to the expert, all that dirt was hiding something far more interesting.
Underneath all this filth and mess, we have the most wonderful bronze bull.
The more closely he examined it, the more signs of quality began to emerge. From the finely cast bronze work to the craftsmanship of the movement itself, everything suggested this was far from an ordinary clock. Then came an important discovery.
You're lucky. Look, the original pendulum.
Still there.
Still there.
The original pendulum had survived intact for centuries. For collectors, details like that can make a tremendous difference. When the owner suggested the clock might be worth a few £1,000s, the expert immediately raised expectations.
Even in this state, I think your initial offer would be in the region of 20,000. 20,000 pounds in the rough like this. You're not going to replace this retail anything under 30 to 35,000.
What had spent years hidden away in an attic box was suddenly revealed as a clock worth tens of thousands of pounds. And the story did not end there. After a professional restoration, the transformation was remarkable.
The moment of truth.
Wow.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, you've done a great job. That's fantastic.
Wow.
Oh, it's beautiful. It really is. No, it's not quite so ugly.
A clock once dismissed as ugly. A French masterpiece nearly 3 centuries old. And one of the most satisfying transformations ever seen on Antique Roadshow. Al Stohlman tooled leatherwork picture. Could a picture of a horse created on leather actually be connected to the history of an entire craft? At first glance, this does not look like the traditional paintings made with oil or watercolor that many people are familiar with. But behind every line on the leather surface is a technique that requires precision, experience, and countless hours of handwork. More importantly, it is directly connected to one of the most influential names in the world of leathercraft.
So this is a leather picture of a horse that was made by Al Stohlman. And my great-grandfather started working with leather, and he realized there were no good tools. So he created some leatherworking tools in partnership with Al Stohlman, and they kind of went around and toured and taught people how to use the leather tools.
From its origins, this was never an ordinary piece of leatherwork. Al Stohlman did not just create handcrafted pieces. He helped shape the way generations of artists learned and developed the techniques of leather carving. But to understand why this work was so special, the expert had to look at Stohlman's importance in the field.
Al Stohlman is considered to be one of the pioneers or the godfather of leathercraft tooling. He's born in California. As a kid, he likes drawing pictures of the Pacific Northwest animals.
In leather tooling, every detail is created directly on the surface, where each mark is almost impossible to undo. The combination of artistic ability and craftsmanship helped make Stohlman such an important figure. And this horse picture could be connected to a major turning point in his career.
It's widely recorded that in 1952, he created a massive leatherwork picture of a Palomino horse that caught the eye of the owner of the craft tool company.
If this was truly the piece mentioned in Stohlman's history, its importance went far beyond its appearance. It represented the moment when one craftsman's talent helped bring leathercraft to more people through tools, instructional books, and teaching methods. And finally, the expert revealed the value of this special work.
This is a shining example of great craftsmanship. And if this were in a retail setting, we could easily see someone putting $30,000 to $50,000 on it.
Wow, that's a lot. Wow.
It certainly is.
From a picture of a horse created on leather, Al Stohlman's work became a memorable discovery on Antiques Roadshow. Its value came not only from the craftsmanship, but also from the story of an artist who helped change the way an entire community understood and developed leathercraft. At first glance, this appears to be nothing more than an 18th century pastel portrait, but the longer the experts studied it, the more convinced they became that a much bigger story was hidden behind it. The owner believed it was painted by Richard Cosway, and that the woman in the drawing was Maria Cosway, his famous wife. If that assumption proved correct, the portrait would already be considered an important work.
This is a drawing by Richard Cosway, who was an 18th century British artist. The subject matter is his wife, Maria Cosway.
Richard Cosway is possibly one of England's greatest portrait miniaturists.
Richard Cosway was one of the most celebrated portrait artists among the British aristocracy in the late 18th century. He was best known for his miniature portraits, making a large-scale pastel drawing like this an exceptionally rare discovery. The quality of the work immediately stood out. The natural expression, subtle lighting, and lifelike features created an intimacy rarely seen in portrait drawings of the period. Then a single detail changed the entire direction of the investigation.
If it's Causeway and it's his wife, it's a very important sort of thing. But I might throw you a little curve here. Now the question is whether that's an inscription or a signature.
The inscription R. Causeway might not be the artist's signature at all. Instead, it could simply be an ownership mark left by a collector. If that were true, the drawing might have been created by an entirely different artist. The appraiser even suggested that the quality of the portrait seemed unusually strong for Richard Causeway. For that reason, he believed the drawing deserved much deeper research before any final attribution could be made. That also meant its value could change dramatically depending on what future discoveries revealed.
If this were Causeway and his Maria Causeway, so I would think you estimate this at auction for about $10,000 to $20,000. Now, if it's the other possibility that you might be looking at $30,000 to $40,000. This is one of the best drawings I've seen in years.
Really?
If the portrait truly proved to be the work of Richard Causeway, it could be worth between $10,000 and $20,000. But if future research identified it as the work of another great European master, the value could rise to $30,000 to $40,000. Although the final answer remains uncertain, the appraiser had no doubt that this was one of the finest drawings he had seen in years. Sometimes it is the unanswered questions that make a work of art even more compelling to scholars and collectors alike. Not every first edition becomes extraordinary simply because it is rare. Sometimes a few handwritten lines and the identity of the person receiving them are what transform a book into something far more valuable. These 3 Ayn Rand books once belonged to Sarah, the cousin who sponsored Rand's journey from Russia to the United States during the 1920s.
We have 3 Ayn Rand books. My great-grandmother, Sarah, was Ayn Rand's first cousin.
Wow.
And Sarah was Ayn's sponsor to the United States in the 1920s.
Long before becoming the author of The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, Rand experienced the Russian Revolution and watched her family lose much of what they owned. In 1926, she was finally allowed to travel to America to study filmmaking, but that opportunity depended on the support of Sarah and her family. That connection makes these volumes far more than signed books. They are association copies, books personally inscribed to someone who played a meaningful role in the author's life.
And of course, what's wonderful about them is that they're all inscribed. Rand did not like to sign books frequently.
Oh.
And so it's lovely to have these inscriptions that were not only written to someone in particular, but a family member who was instrumental to bringing her to the United States.
The most remarkable example is We the Living, Rand's first novel published in the United States. In it, she thanks Sarah for saving her from the kind of hell described in the story itself. Even more significant was the date beneath the inscription. The book was signed 5 days before its official publication, making it a pre-publication association copy. In the rare book market, that is a type of provenance that is almost impossible to recreate.
The book was released on April 7th, 1936. This inscription is dated April 2nd, so a full 5 days before it actually went out to publishers. So it's what you would kind of call a pre-publication association copy.
The other 2 books represent later milestones in Rand's career. Individually, 2 are first editions, while the third is a 5th printing. Together, however, their shared family history gives the collection far greater significance. A buyer is not simply acquiring famous novels, but a lasting record of the relationship that helped Rand begin a new life in America.
But because there are associations with the family, and they were so important in regard to the events in her life and bringing her out of Russia, I would describe the whole group at auction to have a global estimate of $20,000 to $30,000. Thank you so much for bringing it in.
Thank you. Thank you.
With an auction estimate of $20,000 to $30,000, the collection shows how provenance can outweigh edition or signature alone. These are not simply 3 books by Ayn Rand, but a record of the family connection that helped shape the course of her life and literary career.
This is a Rolex day-date model. I bought it in 1964. It became known later as the presidential model when Lyndon Baines Johnson got one as a gift, and his was the 18-karat gold plate.
And where did you buy it?
I bought it in Hong Kong. I'd been drafted into the Army, and I was in Korea. During a tour of duty in Korea, you got a 1-week R&R, either Tokyo or Hong Kong. My wife at the time and I met in Hong Kong, and she bought this for me as my birthday present.
A Rolex day date has always held a special place in the history of the brand. But what makes this particular watch stand out is not only the famous president name, it is the combination of small details that somehow survived with it for decades. Introduced in 1956, the day date became the first wristwatch to display both the full day of the week and the date on the dial. Over time, the model became associated with world leaders, executives, and influential figures, helping create the nickname that collectors still use today, the Rolex President. But in the world of vintage Rolex collecting, not every day date is viewed the same way. One of the details that immediately caught the expert's attention was the 1/8 carat white gold case. While many buyers during that period preferred the more recognizable look of yellow gold, white gold versions were produced in much smaller numbers. That difference made them a more unusual variation for collectors searching for vintage day-date models. Then there was another important detail hidden in plain sight. The dial itself was a pie pan dial, a signature feature of early day-date watches with slightly sloped outer edges that created a unique sense of depth. To most people, it might seem like a small design choice. But for Rolex collectors, details like this can reveal the period, originality, and desirability of a watch. However, the biggest surprise was not only the watch itself, it was everything that stayed with it. The original box, catalog, timing papers, hang tags, and small accessories had all been preserved for more than half a century. For many owners, these items would have simply been packaging and easily thrown away. But for collectors, they help complete the story of the watch from the moment it originally left the store. A Rolex can be serviced, repaired, and maintained over time, but once original documents and accessories disappear, they are almost impossible to replace. That is why a complete set carries such importance in the vintage watch world. It does not just add extra items beside the watch, it preserves its history. And after all these years, this birthday gift purchased in Hong Kong still carried almost everything that came with it from the very beginning.
That's right. In today's market, because it's a whole complete set and the watch is in such great condition, a retail price on this is going to be $20,000.
Oh, my. Well, it kept up with the times. I'm glad to hear that. Wonderful. Thank you. It's great. Good news.
Many sports collectibles become valuable because they are connected to a legendary athlete. This medal is different. Its significance comes from the moment it represents. At first glance, it appears to be nothing more than an old Olympic gold medal that has been carefully preserved by a family for generations. But this medal carries the date 1936. Berlin, the first Olympic Games in which basketball was officially included as a medal event, and it was awarded to Uncle Carl, a member of the very first United States basketball team to win Olympic gold.
I brought an Olympic gold medal that was given to Uncle Carl in 1936 at the Olympics in Berlin.
Yes, indeed. That was the first Olympics that they included basketball as a medal event in 1936 in Berlin.
That fact alone elevates this medal far beyond the status of a family keepsake. It belongs to the day basketball first stepped onto the Olympic stage. What makes the story even more fascinating is that Uncle Carl rarely talked about that achievement. He was known as a quiet man. And perhaps part of the reason was the unusual championship game itself.
That was one interesting part of that game, was that it was a low-scoring affair. At 19-8, the USA defeated Canada in the gold medal game, and it was played in a heavy rain.
The final was played on a clay court. Heavy rain poured down throughout the game. The United States defeated Canada by a score of just 19-8. Today, Olympic basketball brings to mind packed arenas, global superstars, and spectacular highlights. But its beginning looked very different. Rougher, harder, and in many ways, more remarkable. This medal doesn't simply represent a victory. It represents the very first chapter of Olympic basketball history.
We couldn't find any other examples that have come for sale from this team, being the first basketball team to win a gold medal.
Oh, really?
Based on the rarity. Our opinion at auction for the gold medal, we would expect it to sell for between $25,000 to $35,000 at auction.
Oh, wow.
And we would believe you could insure it for $50,000.
Okay.
No comparable example from that team could be found on the market. That was the moment this metal transformed from a family heirloom into an exceptionally rare piece of sports history. An auction value of $25,000 to $35,000. An insurance value of $50,000. Yet its greatest value may be something no appraisal can measure. It is a surviving piece of the beginning of Olympic basketball, preserved for decades by the family of a man who never felt the need to talk much about his victory. The medal tells that story for him. After exploring relics from modern wars, we're about to travel much farther back in time. Not 1 century, not 2, but nearly 500 years. The next object wasn't discovered at an auction or purchased from an antique shop. It has remained in the same family for more than half a millennium.
This is your ancestral home.
My family lived here for 550 years till 1946. Some of the contents were removed by my grandfather when he gave Lyme away, and it passed to my father and then has come down to me now.
That story alone makes this artifact remarkable. It isn't simply an antique. It is a piece of family history, carefully preserved and passed down through generation after generation. But what truly caught the experts' attention was the dagger itself.
We've banded agate, and then we've got the use of carnelian. This is a dagger, but it's terribly elegant. It's actually so finely made that it couldn't really be used in anger.
Right.
Banded agate, carnelian, silver. Every detail suggests that this was never intended for the battlefield. It was created to display wealth, refinement, and social status, rather than to serve as a practical weapon. Then the family shared a tradition that made the story even more intriguing.
Well, the family tradition is that it belonged to King Charles I.
Indeed, there is the name in Latin, Carolus, but I have to ask myself, is it Charles I?
If that tradition were true, this would be a royal artifact. But the expert refused to jump to conclusions. Instead, he carefully examined every clue, separating family legend from historical evidence. Even so, the results were remarkable.
We think this is a 16th century piece because its manufacturer is almost certainly Italy. It's a serious European work of art. The lapidary work is absolutely fabulous.
Although its connection to King Charles I could not be confirmed, the dagger's true origins were extraordinary. It was crafted in 16th century Italy. Not merely an antique weapon, but a genuine Renaissance work of art.
I think an auction estimate would have to be between £15,000 and £25,000.
Really? Yeah.
An auction estimate of £15,000 to £25,000 reflected the significance of an artifact that has survived for nearly 5 centuries. Yet perhaps the most memorable part of this story wasn't the valuation. It was seeing a dagger that might appear to be a weapon at first glance, ultimately recognized as a rare and exceptional masterpiece of European Renaissance craftsmanship. At first glance, this cabinet appears to be elegant but remarkably understated. There are no elaborate carvings, no gilded details, and nothing designed to command immediate attention. Because of that, many people could easily walk right past it without realizing they had just overlooked one of the finest examples of late 18th century English furniture. Only after a closer inspection did the experts begin to notice the subtle details that revealed it was anything but ordinary.
It belongs to a friend of mine, and it was inherited by her late husband in 1940s, and I presume it had been in the family for quite a long time.
Be interesting to see how far back in that family.
The late 18th century marked the golden age of English cabinet making. As exotic hardwoods arrived from across the expanding British Empire, satinwood quickly became one of the most sought-after materials among the wealthy. Its naturally luminous golden color and remarkable depth made it especially prized, while its high cost and challenging nature meant only the finest craftsmen could work with it successfully.
And you could actually walk past it. You know, it doesn't stand and say something until you do stop and look. And then one starts to realize that these oval panels, this is satinwood, which was an extremely expensive exotic veneer from the last quarter of the 18th century.
The longer the cabinet was examined, the more exceptional it became. Delicate stringing in rosewood, ebony, and boxwood blended almost seamlessly into the satinwood veneer, while the mahogany interior displayed the same meticulous workmanship. These hidden details often reveal far more about a cabinet maker's skill than its outward appearance. Its overall quality also reminded the appraiser of leading designers such as Thomas Sheraton and George Hepplewhite, and even prestigious workshops like Ince and Mayhew, renowned for producing furniture for Britain's aristocracy.
So what at first looks like just a nice, well-designed cabinet or cupboard is in fact an exceptional piece of furniture. So goodness knows, this was made by an important maker. It could be someone like Ince and Mayhew.
That is what makes this cabinet so remarkable. Its value comes not from extravagant decoration, but from rare materials, masterful veneering, and craftsmanship worthy of one of England's finest furniture makers. Together, those qualities transformed what seemed like an ordinary cupboard into a piece any serious collector would be proud to own.
If one went into a good gallery, where you'd have to go to buy such a piece as this today, you'd have to give between £25,000 and £30,000.
Well, I think she'll be rather startled.
I hope she'll be pleased with it.
For decades, this cabinet quietly stood in a family home, never needing elaborate decoration to prove its worth. It simply waited until someone with the right knowledge recognized what had been there all along. Sometimes the greatest antiques are not the ones that dominate a room, but the masterpieces whose true brilliance is visible only to those who know exactly what they are looking at. The Jade Imperial Seal.
I brought 2 jade tablets and a jade seal that belonged to my great-great-grandmother. I have been told they are 18th century from China.
The family believed these pieces dated to 18th century China and had been passed down through several generations. Presented to the expert were 2 inscribed jade plaques and a jade seal, topped with a pair of dragons, a motif long associated with power, authority, and the imperial court.
The seal's a symbol of imperial authority.
But a closer examination revealed an important clue carved into the plaques.
Dated here, Guangshi, first year of Guangshi, which is 1875.
That inscription suggested the story might not belong to the 18th century after all. Instead, the objects appeared to be connected to the late Qing dynasty and possibly even to an imperial jade book or court-related commission. At that moment, the value of the collection began to change dramatically.
My mother had them appraised in 2007 for $1,400.
Together as a associated pair, they would carry an auction estimate of $20,000 to $30,000.
Okay. Wow.
The 2 plaques alone were worth far more than the earlier appraisal suggested. But the jade seal was the real star of the evaluation.
And the seal appraised for $1,400 also.
Conservatively, at auction, it would carry an auction estimate of $30,000 to $50,000.
Okay. All right.
Even under a conservative assessment, its value had increased many times over. Yet the expert was not finished. If further research confirmed a strong connection to the Guangxu period, everything could move to an entirely different level.
So it may carry an auction estimate of $300,000 to $500,000.
Oh, is that all? Okay. Well, that's a little bit different than what I was expecting today, but oh my. Thank you. That's amazing.
What had once been a collection valued at only a few $1,000s now carried the potential to become an imperial treasure worth as much as $500,000. Not bad for a group of jade pieces that had spent decades quietly sitting in the family. Not every painting comes with an explanation written by the artist who created it, but in the case of the Persian book, the most valuable piece was not on the canvas itself, but inside a letter that had remained with the painting for nearly a century. That single letter transformed a beautiful work of art into an object of remarkable historical significance.
My great-grandfather wanted to decorate his home in the early 30s. He'd been successful in a business. He went to New York to the Grand Central Art Gallery. This caught his eye immediately, and he bought it, brought it home, and it was in his home for 75 years.
The painting had remained in the same family ever since the owner's great-grandfather purchased it from New York's Grand Central Art Galleries in the early 1930s. Its creator, HOVSEP PUSHMAN, became known for poetic paintings inspired by Eastern art and culture. Yet what excited the appraisers most was not simply Pushman's reputation, but the remarkable document that had survived alongside the painting.
Yes, the artist wrote to my grandfather after he purchased the painting. He said, I'm pleased to learn from the Grand Central Art Galleries that you purchased my painting, The Persian Book, and you expressed the desire to know from the artist, the spiritual meaning of the painting.
Rather than leaving viewers to interpret the symbolism for themselves, Pushman explained it in his own words. He described the painting not as a real historical scene, but as a vision of a past that existed only in his imagination. For collectors, a painting preserved together with an original letter from the artist is exceptionally rare. The letter not only strengthens the provenance, but also records the artist's intended meaning, adding a level of historical and scholarly value that very few works of art can offer.
Well, for auction at this point, that would seem a little high. At auction, we'd be looking at somewhere near $15,000 to $25,000. But that said, given the quality, style, provenance, literature about the painting, I think it should be insured at somewhere between $50,000 and $75,000.
Okay. Thank you very much.
It was the combination of provenance and the original letter that pushed the insurance value far beyond the expected auction price. Finding another painting with the same history and supporting documentation would be extraordinarily difficult.
It's one of the best I've ever seen. It has lovely movement and lovely quiet at the same time.
Valued at $15,000 to $25,000 at auction and $50,000 to $75,000 for insurance, the Persian book also earned one of the highest compliments an appraiser could give. Nearly a century later, the painting continues to preserve not only HOVSEP PUSHMAN's art, but his own explanation of what it truly meant to the first person who owned it.
This piece was originally an engagement ring of my great-aunt. Her name was Renee Thornton. She was actually a coloratura soprano at the Metropolitan Opera in the 1920s.
From the story behind it, this piece was already more than just an ordinary diamond pendant. Before being passed down through the family, it belonged to a woman with a special life connected to the famous world of opera. In the early 20th century, fine jewelry was not only a display of beauty or wealth, it also represented social status, relationships, and important moments in the owner's life. With antique jewelry, value sometimes comes not only from diamonds or design, but also from the people and stories connected to the piece. And the journey of this jewel continued with another new chapter.
After that, she divorced her husband, who was a conductor of the Met, and she ended up marrying in the 30s, early 30s, a duke from Italy, and she was the Duchess d'Andria, and this was her engagement ring.
Across generations, family jewelry is often changed to suit its next owner. Some pieces are stored away and forgotten, while others are transformed so they can continue to be worn and appreciated. And that is exactly what happened with this piece.
My mother inherited it, and she didn't like it as an engagement ring, so she changed the back of it and changed it from a ring to a pendant that my mom could wear.
Okay. It's a very beautiful piece.
After a closer inspection, the expert realized the piece still carried many features of high-end jewelry from the early 20th century. The platinum and gold structure, along with the craftsmanship style, reflected the skill of jewelers from that period. But beyond its history, the diamonds on the pendant were also an important part of its value.
That center diamond is about a carat 17, and this is by calculation, so I'm measuring and figuring out what I think it is. I think a piece like this, retail, would be $20,000.
Are you kidding?
Old European cut diamonds are connected to the period before modern cutting techniques became widely used. Combined with the heart-shaped design, diamond quality, and the story of Renee Thornton, the pendant became a connection between art, personal history, and fine jewelry. From a family piece transformed over time, it turned out to preserve a special story lasting across generations.
I brought in this pin. It was in my father's safe deposit box, and we had to open it when he passed. We actually someone had to drill it open, and we found a bunch of jewelry that I had never seen before. And this is one of the things it found.
After years hidden away, this brooch finally made its way out of the safe and onto the appraisal table. At first glance, the expert could already see signs of a high-quality Art Deco piece. But the most exciting detail was not only the design or the diamonds surrounding it.
Your wife is correct. It is a sapphire. That color suggests that it's a sapphire from the Kashmir origin.
That possibility immediately changed the story. In the world of fine gemstones, origin can make an enormous difference. Certain locations are highly prized by collectors because of their rarity, history, and the unique qualities associated with the stones they produced.
We can't know for sure without a laboratory report, so they can tell you with some certainty where they're from. When you see the light hit that stone and you see that prized velvet blue, you kind of know it's probably going to be from Kashmir.
This is why professional testing is so important for exceptional gemstones. An expert's experience can reveal important clues, but only a detailed report can confirm the full story. Sometimes that single confirmation can completely transform how a piece is viewed on the market.
If we get that lab report, and it is a Kashmir sapphire, and it is about a carat, I would have no problem estimating this for auction in the $15,000 to $20,000 range.
Oh my goodness. I guess we're going to have to reopen the estate. I'm going to have to divide this 3 ways.
The final estimate proved this was already an impressive discovery. But what made the appraisal even more exciting was the possibility that there was still another level of value waiting to be confirmed. One small detail about a gemstone's origin could turn a beautiful brooch into something far more extraordinary. And that is what makes antique jewelry so fascinating. Sometimes the biggest secret is the one that cannot be seen at first glance. If any case proves that a treasure can begin with almost nothing, it is this one. Not $200, not even $20, but just $2.50. A small weekly sacrifice, the kind most people would forget, quietly became the beginning of a family treasure that no one saw coming.
When I was in high school, I would every week save my lunch money, and on Fridays, I'd buy a new Tennessee pearl for about $2.50. No, it was $2.50.
But the story gets even stranger. Her grandfather once lived near a creek bed where people could still find pearls in the water. They were so familiar that children did not even treat them like gems. They flipped them across the creek as if they were marbles.
And they used to go over there and find them and flip and see who could flip them the furthest across to get them across the creek bed.
The pearls, not the shells.
The pearls. They treated them just like they were marbles.
What once sat under a counter and was once thrown like marbles had become much rarer. But to the owner, they were never just pearls. One was a high school graduation gift from her parents. Another had been removed and sewn into the top of her daughter's wedding dress.
That one is my high school graduation from my parents. Mother and Daddy gave me that. When my daughter Maxie got married, we took it off and sewed it in the top of her wedding dress in the V.
Then the appraiser began turning those memories into numbers. The pearls she once bought for $2.50 could now bring $300 to $400 each. The necklace alone added up to $11,200. One rosé pearl could be worth $2,000 and another around $1,500. Placed together, this was no longer just a childhood box of pearls, it was a collection.
These pearls today could go for $300 and $400 each. You add up the whole necklace and there's $1,200. But when you look at the collection, there's $6,500 here, at auction for something like this.
I have a daughter and a granddaughter. They're going to stay right there.
Right.
Her answer said everything. $16,500 was a serious number, but to her, this pearl collection had carried too many memories to be treated only as merchandise. Lunch money, a cigar box, a creek bed, and even her daughter's wedding dress. Sometimes, Roadshow is not only valuing an object, it is valuing a lifetime lived with it and passed through a family. We've finally reached the top 5, and from this point forward, the valuations begin to climb into truly impressive territory. What's fascinating about the next case, however, is that it revolves around a material most people would never associate with great wealth or luxury. Glass. Yes, glass. This necklace had remained in the same family for generations. The owner's grandmother purchased it during a trip to New York around 1918. It was later passed down to her mother and eventually to the current owner. Throughout all those years, almost nobody knew exactly what it was.
Gone to some jewelers and, they say, oh, it's pretty, but we don't know anything.
And what do you think it is?
Honestly, I don't know.
Even the owner didn't have an answer. And when the appraisal began, it initially seemed as though her assumption was correct.
You know what? You're on the right track. It is a piece of glass.
At that moment, many people would assume the story was over. A piece of glass, not diamonds, not gemstones, not a rare, precious material. But that was only the first twist. Because in the world of artistic jewelry, the material is not always the most important part of the story. Sometimes the name behind the design matters far more.
And it says G. Fouquet. George Fouquet comes from a great French jewelry house.
And the name that appeared here was Georges Fouquet, one of the most celebrated figures in early 20th century French jewelry design. The Fouquet family helped shape both the Art Nouveau and Art Deco movements, embracing a philosophy that differed dramatically from many traditional jewelers of their era. For them, creativity often mattered more than expensive materials.
The material was not what's important. It was design.
The value was in the design, in the artistic vision, in the craftsmanship. And suddenly the owner realized she wasn't simply holding a necklace made of glass. She was holding a work connected to one of the great names in French decorative arts. Then came the valuation.
I'm going to say conservatively $10,000 to $15,000.
Oh my gracious.
Yeah. So what do you think? A nice piece of glass, huh?
Oh, it is a nice piece of glass.
A piece of glass, a legendary name, and a valuation of $10,000 to $15,000. Exactly the kind of surprise that has made Antiques Roadshow famous for uncovering hidden treasures in the most unexpected places.
What a marvelous brooch, my goodness me. Is it a family one?
Yes, it came from my great-grandmother to my mum, to my nana, then my mum, and then it's passed down.
Right from the beginning, this brooch already carried a special family story, having been passed down through several generations. For the expert, just looking at the design was enough to suggest that this was not an ordinary piece of jewelry.
When do you think it was made?
I haven't got a clue.
Come on, have a go.
Great-grandmother, so 18-something?
No, absolutely not 18 at all. This is actually a 20th century brooch, so maybe the story's got a little bit...
Just a few details were enough to completely change the family's original assumption. Instead of being from the 19th century as they expected, the brooch was actually an early 20th century Art Deco design. Its strong geometric lines and balanced structure are exactly what made this style so distinctive and still admired nearly a century later.
These long diamonds here we call baguette diamonds, and here in the middle we've got rather a substantial, brilliant cut diamond.
So it is a diamond, and I didn't think it would.
You didn't think it was a diamond? No.
And that became the biggest surprise of the appraisal. Not only was this central stone a real diamond, but the entire design featured baguette diamonds alongside a brilliant cut diamond. The combination revealed the level of craftsmanship and quality expected from a fine Art Deco piece.
And if you went into a West End shop to buy such an object again, I think it's possible that they would ask you £12,000 for it.
Good God.
That is exactly what makes Antiques Roadshow discoveries so fascinating. Sometimes, the greatest treasures are not newly found. They are the ones that have quietly remained within a family all along. Not every portrait is large enough to hang across an entire wall. Some are small enough to fit in the palm of a hand, yet preserve the story of someone who played a role in the history of the British Empire. This portrait miniature has remained in the same family for generations. From the moment the experts saw it, they knew it was more than a treasured heirloom. It had been created for a man of remarkable importance.
This is a very beautiful David Anderson.
He's my 4 times great-grandfather.
There's lovely pearls here with his initial.
David Anderson served as the trusted right-hand man of Warren Hastings, the first Governor-General of British India. His prominent position explains why he owned such an exquisitely crafted portrait miniature. During the late 18th century, miniature portraits painted on ivory were considered luxury objects, often carried as personal keepsakes or given as meaningful gifts. Even the tiny pearl monogram and the remarkably fine details of the face demonstrate the extraordinary skill required to create works like this.
Well, now, the thing is that It's not actually signed by Cosway.
Signed by E.
Exactly. There's a large E in it.
Yeah.
It's a very cursive E, slightly tilted over.
Right.
And I don't think there's any doubt that it is the signature of another artist, an artist called Engelhardt.
For many years, the family believed the portrait had been painted by Richard Cosway, but a single detail in the signature completely changed that conclusion. The true artist was George Engelhardt, one of Britain's greatest miniature portrait painters of the late 18th century. Engelhardt became renowned for capturing expressive faces with remarkable depth and subtle color. Combined with the family's clear provenance and David Anderson's historical significance, the portrait became an especially desirable work for collectors.
It's worth about £5,000, £6,000, £7,000.
Right.
And yet, it's such a good one. It could well reach 5 figures.
Crazy.
An initial estimate of £5,000 to £7,000 was already impressive. However, the appraiser believed the exceptional quality of the miniature could easily push its value into 5 figures at auction. Yet the portrait's greatest importance extends beyond its price. Within a frame small enough to fit in a hand, it preserves the image of a historical figure, the craftsmanship of one of Britain's finest miniature painters, and a family story that has survived intact through generations. We're getting very close to the top 5, and at this position sits a name that hardly needs an introduction. Tiffany & Co., one of the most famous jewelry houses in the world. But what makes this story so interesting is that for many years the owner was told something completely different about her necklace. She was told it was worth little more than its gold scrap value.
I had it appraised about 20 years ago, and they told me it was only worth the scrap weight of gold.
If that appraisal had been correct, this piece would never have made it into today's countdown. The necklace was originally given as a wedding gift in 1872 and had remained in the same family for more than 150 years. That alone makes it an impressive survivor. But what truly caught the experts' attention wasn't just the necklace itself. It was the small box sitting beside it. A box that turned out to be a crucial part of the story.
And the box is also an important part of the story. And if we open up the box here, what we will see is that the inside of the box, it says Tiffany & Company, Union Square.
In the world of antiques, provenance can change everything. And this necklace is a perfect example. Without the box, it would simply be an attractive 19th century gold necklace. With the original Tiffany & Company Union Square box, it gains a documented connection to one of the most celebrated jewelry firms in history. Suddenly, it becomes much more than gold. It becomes Tiffany.
You always will need to keep it with the box, because if the box and the piece become separated, then nobody's going to know that the piece is actually Tiffany.
Right.
That's why the expert emphasized that the box was almost as important as the necklace itself. Together, they tell a story that neither could tell alone. And after years of wondering about its true worth, the owner was finally about to get an answer.
At auction, one would expect to gain anywhere between $3,000 and $4,000. For insurance purposes, it should probably be insured for about $9,000.
Oh, that much. Thank you.
Yes, far more than the scrap gold valuation she had heard years earlier. A Tiffany necklace, more than 150 years old. Its original box still intact, and an insurance value of around $9,000. More than enough to earn this remarkable family heirloom a place in today's top 6.